What's going on, movie fans? I told you I was going to post my Spider-Man No Way Home spoilers review today, and let's get into it. I do first want to mention this movie made a lot of money in 3 days. The budget of this movie was $200 million. The movie has made 253 in America, 334 overseas. In total, it has made $587 million in 72 hours. It is the biggest global debut of all time. The only two movies above it are the most recent Avenger movies. That's crazy money to make in 72 hours. They've already passed their budget. It's all profit from this point. I think the movie deserves it, to be honest, and that's pretty crazy to see that number, especially with the pandemic still going on right now. So if you hadn't seen the previous Spider-Man movie, you know this one continues literally seconds right after the previous one, where Mysterio frames Spider-Man for murdering him when he didn't. So we start off with Mary Jane and him swinging out of the city, and then the cops go looking for him and they question him, and once he leaves jail, the whole city hates him and some people like him, but his life is really flipped upside down. So he goes to Doctor Strange to take back time to see if everyone can forget about what he did. He's asking Doctor Strange, hey, can you help me make people forget about what happened? Now, the part that I didn't like too much about it was when he did this, he was very whiny, and at first I thought Spider-Man hadn't grown up. Peter grows up the second half of the movie. The first half, he's still kind of like, hey, Doctor Strange, can you help me unframe myself and make the whole world forget who I am? But when you help me, can you make sure that my Aunt May, my best friend Ned, and Mary Jane don't forget who I am? They have to know I'm Spider-Man. And then Doctor Strange is like, oh, you can't interrupt the spell. And then he's like, okay, your friends know that you are Spider-Man. Do not interrupt the spell anymore. He starts interrupting the spell more, and then it messes everything up, and then Doctor Strange has to use his device to keep the spell in some cube. And then he explains to Peter how dangerous it is, and then he's like, did you even go to the college to ask if they would accept you? Because the only reason he's trying to do this is because his friends can't go to college because they know an outlaw, and the whole public hates him, so it's kind of ruining his friends' lives too. And Peter was like, oh, I could have called them? And it was just kind of a cheap way of doing it. Doctor Strange got all mad. You didn't even call them to check? It was just such a lazy way, writing-wise, to get around it. But then again, I get it, because this is the only way they could really get these villains into his world. But as Doctor Strange, he's supposed to be a very smart, intelligent character that knows the damages of warping time and going back in time and using magic. And he should have been like, no, because at first he was, right? He was like, this is too dangerous. These are their fates. They have to die. You cannot save these people. I liked that part of it. He's supposed to be like a really smart sorcerer, and they kind of did him dirty a little bit. Another one for the script was the villains. I thought they were kind of weakly written. Electro was like a complete nerd in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He's got like fluffy hair and he's glasses and he's very nerdy. But then in this movie, he's just Jamie Foxx. Yo, this electricity, I like it here. I want more of that power. Now he's cool as hell. It's almost like Jamie Foxx is like, look, I'll sign back on, but I'm not going to be a fucking nerd. You're going to make me look cool. Otto Octavius, the de-aging on his face, was probably the best de-aging I've ever seen. He's about 70 years old. And I looked at a picture of him, and this is what he looks like right now, and this is what he looked like in the movie, and I thought the de-aging was some of the best I've ever seen, because I couldn't even tell. I thought them bringing all these villains in when they turned evil and making them good, and they want to team up with the heroes to create serums to save themselves, was really a weak way to go about it. Bringing them in, they were able to bring in the other three Spider-Man. It was more of a product to me. Some of the plot was kind of preposterous, like them trying to develop the serum to turn the bad guys good. A lot of it was more pandering to me to get the crowd to applaud and cheer for the old Spider-Man and the old villains. It's just a collection of references and cameos. They did a great job making it canon, but the movie is pretty filled with nostalgia. I have to give him credit on it. Some of it was bad and some of it was very good, but the nostalgia kind of worked and it kind of didn't work because it was blown up too much and then it was compressed really well. So it was kind of a mixed bag for me. I think them bringing in all these characters from different universes, you got 3 Spider-Man and 5 villains, and I think they did balance that pretty well. I think the balance was, the scales were pretty perfect, to be honest with you, because it's very hard to jam in characters like that, because look at what happened with Spider-Man 3. It was a mess. It didn't work very well. However, with that though, the action to me personally was very, very weak. You had 3 Spider-Man in there and 5 villains. And there was a lot of just swinging around. The only time you actually see some brutal action is when Tom Holland and Green Goblin are going at it. But when Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man show up, but it was just them swinging around and throwing stuff at each other and trying to help you. Here's the device! I was expecting like some Tobey Maguire fighting Doc Ock on the train stuff. Them trying to come up with a plan and they're getting beat up and then they team up on a villain and do combos because Spider-Man's very athletic. He has all this agility that he can do, but they don't utilize absolutely any of it. Even on the bridge with Doc Ock was throwing his arms at Spider-Man, but it was a lot of blocking. It was just a lot of this. But like I said, the tone worked. It was fun. The nostalgia was fun, but I think the humor was a little overdone. But some of the humor really worked. I don't know if Tobey Maguire's like, look, I'm going to sign on to this, but I ain't putting on that fucking mask. I've seen this twice now. There's only a couple frames you see Tobey Maguire in full suit with the mask on where it's not CGI. A lot of it is very quick cuts. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but Michael Giacchino did a great job with the score. This guy set some bars on tone. He was able to really pull the heartstrings, and the mood he gave the score worked phenomenally. The score of this movie was very good. Out of the 3 Tom Holland movies, this definitely is the top of the list when it comes to the Spider-Man scores. The movie is more of a comedy and it's funny and there's quips in it. But then the second half, it gets really serious and it gets really good. And that's when the music for me really elevated to another level. For any Spider-Man fan, this movie had really great humor in it. I think it was a little overdone, a little overcooked, but it also worked for this movie because it helped with the movie's warmth and helped these characters build a comfortable fanboy bubble where they could get lost in the mood, and it saved a lot of the movie because a lot of people relate with the characters, and they molded and melted this thing just perfectly almost, because the relationship between the 3 Spider-Man was what I would expect in a comic book as well. One of the beautiful parts is the movie ends with Tom Holland's Spider-Man wearing the silk shiny suit, which is really great because I hope to God they show that in the next movie because that's one of my favorite suits of his. Now, if you're wondering, should you stay for the end credit scenes? That really depends on you. It's just basically a Doctor Strange 2 trailer. The first mid-credit scene was confusing. They show Eddie Brock in Mexico, but then he disappears out of Tom Holland's universe to go back to his own universe. But when he leaves the bar table, there's a little drop of the Venom symbiote that stayed in Tom Holland's world. Why even show that in the Venom movie if he's just going to disappear in a Spider-Man movie that's literally a couple months later? To make this even more confusing is in the Morbius trailer, you see the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man on the graffiti on the wall. But then in the trailer, you see Michael Keaton's Vulture in the Morbius trailer saying, hey, we should stay in touch, Doc. At this point, I am absolutely confused where the timeline is going. One of my biggest compliments for this movie was the narrative and the story that this took. You see Spider-Man very immature, but he wants to help the villains and save them, and that's just who Spider-Man is. In the ending, he ends up paying the price for it. Aunt May dies. You finally see a broken Spider-Man. They do it with all the Spider-Mans, but Tom Holland has been always around people. The first 2 movies were very family-friendly and fun, and finally you see Spider-Man broken as a person emotionally. Doctor Strange is like, hey, I can reverse all of this, reverse the spell. I can't bring Aunt May back to life, but I can get everyone to forget you're Spider-Man. And it would save his friends and send the villains back to their universes. And Doctor Strange is like, but no one will remember that you're Spider-Man, not even me. So he had to go say goodbye to his friends, and his friend Ned just started bawling, and it was such a really fucking deep emotional scene. And he told him, you're never going to see me again, you'll never remember me. When you come back, just approach me and tell me who you are, and we'll become friends again. When he does, and this coffee shop scene was one of the best scenes in the movie. It soaked you into all, you knew all the outcomes of everything, and you knew the future. You just didn't know his decision at this point. So you have all this soaked into your mind, and then he just stares at his friends in the coffee shop. And she's like, can I help you? He's like, oh, I would like a coffee. He's there to tell them, hey, I'm Peter, I used to be your friend. But he decides not to. He decides to completely forget about them and let them live their lives. He sees that they're happy where they are. And if he comes back in their life, he'll ruin it again. Really sad because he's literally alone. No one remembers him. He has no friends. Not even the Avengers remember who he is. And they really let you live that moment with him by just showing a shot of his face, and his facial expressions just kept showing you more and more of how he wanted to pull back and not tell them who he is. And it was a really great moment. I think it was shot really well, and I think that was one of the strongest parts of the entire film. So this is the last thing I wanted to discuss in my spoiler review. What I'm about to mention now is why I graded the movie what I graded it. I want to thank Jon Watts for writing this movie and directing it and going in this direction. The mood and tone of the second half of this movie was everything I wanted to see. I already had seen the movie once, but I had a very obnoxious crowd. When Aunt May died, I literally had someone in the crowd get up, jump out of their seat, pace between the handicapped section and be like, "Oh, you can't do us like this, bro. You can't do us like this, bro." And it just pulled me out of the movie. But seeing it for a second time without the obnoxious crowd, it was very emotional. When Ned in the end had to say goodbye to Peter and he knew he was never going to see his friend again, he was like crying. That energy was really rough. You felt horrible for him. And when Aunt May died, that was a punch to the stomach. The thing is Jon Watts shot this so good, I knew she was going to die because I already had seen it. And even the second viewing, I got emotional. It was very raw and hurtful. To me, Spider-Man No Way Home is one of the most monumental feats and one of the best MCU movies to date. The writing was richer in this, it was more risky, and the themes are much darker, and the stakes are so much higher as the story unfolds. You're dragged into Peter's painful, emotionally charged, impacting, relatable, and heartbreaking situation with the cruelest outcomes. This was more deep to me because it was his fault. He's the one that wanted to save these villains, and one of those villains he tried to save kills his Aunt May. So he's the one to blame about all this. It was Peter's choice not to send them back to their deaths. He wanted to rehabilitate them, and he ended up paying the deepest price he could with the person he loves the most dying. And I truly believe Spider-Man No Way Home deserves a B+. I think any Spider-Man fan will love this movie. They'll be very happy with it. There's a lot of quips. It's fun. There are darker elements to it, but it's not dark enough to where kids can't watch it. It's not like Logan or anything. So if you haven't seen the new Spider-Man, I would highly recommend it. It is one of the better movies I've seen all year. And if you're a Spider-Man fan, I already know you've seen it. But if you haven't, it was a great movie. You will get something out of it, I promise you. It's definitely theater worthy. For God's sakes, please don't watch this at home. It's got to be watched on the big screen. That is my review for Spider-Man No Way Home. Thanks for watching, guys. And I have more reviews coming up, but my spoiler review is done. So until then, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you movie fans on my next review.